Joining us now with more insights into the assassination of top Iranian nuclear scientist Mohsen Fakhrizadeh is former Israeli Deputy National Security Advisor, Professor Chuck Freilich. Professor, thanks for being with us now. Do you think that the Jewish Chronicle piece describing Israel's involvement holds water?
No.
Why is that?
Well, I'm not saying whether Israel was involved or not, but I think that the details and the estimates presented there are questionable. To believe that the assassination would have provided Israel or whoever did it a gain of 5 to 6 years in the Iranian program, in other words, a postponement, I think is vastly overstated. You have to take into account that Fakhrizadeh was certainly a particularly important figure, but he's one person in a very, very large and professional bureaucracy. Now think of it, if in Israel, in the US, any other country, the head of an important governmental agency was removed, what kind of an effect would that have? Well, it would probably disrupt things. It caused some delay for a few months and maybe more, because Fakhrizadeh was a particularly important individual. But to go to 5, 6 years, as I said, I think is greatly overstated.
Well, assuming that the report is true, that would mean that Mossad agents are leaking information to the press in the United Kingdom. So do you think that this is the case, again, assuming that this is true, or is it more likely that the Mossad allowed this leak, quote unquote, anonymously so that Israel could take credit without taking responsibility?
I don't know who did it. I don't know who's leaking it. And I don't think that's the issue. The issue is what we do to ensure that Iran never gets a nuclear capability. And there are various measures, diplomatic pressures and sanctions, targeted killings, sabotage of the program. For example, there was the attack on the Natanz nuclear facility last summer, which was attributed to Israel and was also significantly gained more time than the killing of Fakhrizadeh did. So all these things together, that's the picture, that's the important thing. And the really critical question that we face at the moment is what position Israel should be taking towards the Biden administration's apparent intention to go back to the nuclear deal.
All right, well, that actually brings us to my final question. Why do you think the report makes such a big deal about not telling the Americans, at least until the last second? Is it to make Israel feel bigger in a sense that they pulled one over on the Trump administration, or is that a dig at Biden as if to say we're not afraid to act alone?
Well, I don't think it was either. Actually, there's a sentence there saying that Israel may have given the U.S. some small clue in advance. And I would imagine that that is the case if this was an Israeli operation. There is a tradition, a long-standing practice between both countries, and one which Israel has always been particularly careful to observe, which is not to surprise the U.S. With things like this, especially an operational activity, which can have effects on the U.S. as well. So I would imagine that the U.S. had some idea, but beyond that, it's an Israeli operation, and you don't have to tell everybody everything all the time, even your close ally.
All right, Professor Freilich, thank you so much for being with us and for your insights.